Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. My name is Rebecca and I'm a mum to a 30-year-old who has special needs and I have disabilities of my own. I also do, I'm going to be doing like parenting content talking about my journey being a parent with disabilities to a medical needs child. I'm also going to be, as in today's video, touching on my disabilities and what it's like to live with them. So let's get into the first topic. Where do I even begin? I'll begin with, I was born really premature. My mum actually told me today when I'm filming this that she was told like we need to apply for the Guinness World Record, or at least I need to, because of my prematurity and how premature I was. I was born at 22 weeks and 2 days gestation. I weighed 480 grams, which is like 1 pound 1 ounce. And I dropped to, that was my birth weight, and then I dropped to like 350. I was intubated as well, so it ended up being, as I grew, my vocal cords only grew to where the tubes sat, so my vocal cords never fully closed. And when I was younger, this is the best my voice has ever sounded. I have had surgeries, like vocal cord surgeries, to try and bring them together more. I've had like different collagen injections. My vocal cords are very scarred and very thin. They're not like normal looking vocal cords. The collagen injections always seem to fall out within a couple of weeks, or like dissolve into my body, so they never really worked. So then when I was 16, I got my tonsils removed, to help, mostly just to help create more space in my mouth to be able to push more air out, to talk more. That's definitely helped. And by the way, I had been doing speech therapy when I was really young, when I had a stutter, and then again when I was 16 to help 16 and older, to just help bring out as much of my voice as I could without putting so much pressure on the muscles. Take it from me, it is very strenuous to really overexert myself, to the point where like sometimes if I yell too much, even now, it hurts. I get a sore throat afterwards because it's very strenuous and it hurts. And again, it was a lot worse when I was younger. It's so weird, if it gets to the point where I get so strenuous, I would get dizzy, because I was just pushing so much and I was putting so much strain. When I had my tonsils removed, they also injected collagen, and my vocal cords fully closed, and they were also like fattened up obviously on both sides, so my voice was crystal freaking clear. Like I still remember waking up and talking for the first time and just crying and just so like euphoric. It truly was. And I rang my friends and they were all like, oh my god, like this is amazing. And then like 3 weeks later the stuff dissolved, and you know, it really brought up a big insecurity of my voice. And I am someone that uses my voice for everything. Like as we all do, for opinions, thoughts, feelings, just general conversation. I'd started to, and you know, I was bullied a lot for my voice and imitated a lot, and that just made me feel really insecure about myself, my self-worth, my opinions. I just felt like I didn't matter in that sense. I didn't have a voice. And it wasn't until that I started to have the last 2 surgeries that I had, which basically incorporated like a little spring type of plaster. Trigger warning, I'm going to be talking about like, you know, actual surgery procedure and stuff like that in the throat area. That's a trigger for you, skip to this time. Basically they cut into my throat, they put the spring like right where my vocal cords sit, and then during the surgery they sort of briefly woke me up to speak, to make sure that they had put it in the right spot and that it was actually doing its job. And when I tell you, I remember both times that I was sort of, and obviously they told me this prior, but I remember both times sort of waking up briefly and I was like, what? And all I felt, again this is so bizarre, all I felt was just cold air here. That's all I felt. And I was like, what the hell? It was such a bizarre, like, oh, it's such a weird feeling. So the first time, obviously, like, I had only had one vocal cord moving to the middle and the other one was kind of like, eh. So it was still, you know, I still had a lot of intense speech therapy at that point, like between the two, just so I could really strengthen as much as I could. He was like, we're super happy with how your vocal cords are looking. They're moving really nicely. Obviously they're still pretty scarred, so you're always going to have a little bit of that huskiness, but you shouldn't struggle as much now. I'm very, very comfortable with my voice. I think a lot of it is just growing up. I've become very confident with who I am. My voice is a part of who I am. It's literally what I'm known for, and I love that. So I guess that's one disability, is my voice. My next disability is my eyes. I want to talk about my eyes because so I am legally blind, like literally classed as legally blind. So again, leading back to being so premature, because I had to be intubated obviously to keep me alive, to keep my lungs going, the oxygen from that went into my eyes and the blood vessels started to come out to the surface of my eyes, which then created a condition called retinopathy of prematurity, ROP, and it is something that a lot of preemie babies are, known to potentially get. So yeah, obviously I got it. I got stage, I think it was 3-4. I needed to have surgery done to try and correct as much as they could. I was only like maybe, I think it was maybe like 9 or 10 weeks old. Then at 10 months old, I experienced 2 hemorrhages in both my eyes, so I needed LASIK done. So from that point, I have been wearing glasses, prescription, very, very high prescription glasses since I was 10 months old. And over the years, I went through the really Einstein looking glasses, and then I went through the real square, like super, like rectangle looking glasses, which I cringe every time I look at photos of myself back then, because it's not cute. This is literally the biggest size that I can do. I always kind of tell people, like, I can see, but it's just not enough to be able to drive, to legally be able to drive. That's kind of the way I put it. Like, I can see colours, I can see, obviously with glasses. Without it, it's just a whole colour of blur pretty much. But with glasses, I can see my plan, I can see, I can see my chair, like those sorts of things I can see, just not in an over amount of great detail. I went for my driver's license. Here in Australia, we have 3 different types of like stages to get your full license. You have your learner's permit, your 2P plates, so you've got your red, I think it's red, or is it green? No. You have your red P plates for 6 months, and then your green P plates for 18 months. And then after that, you've got your full license. So, and back when I got it done, you had to be 16 and 9 months to the day. So you bet when I was 16 and 9 months to the day, I walked right into that, licensing centre, and I had studied and studied, because you have to do a theory test, and you have to get, I think it's over 24 minimum to pass. And then after that, you have to get your eyes tested, make sure that you're legally able to drive, and then you're good to go. So I did the test first, and I got 27 out of 30, so I passed with flying colours. I didn't even get past the licensing centre desk, where they're like, okay, cover one eye and try and read blah blah blah. And yeah, they were like, look, you can try and go to your optometrist and see if you can get a letter from them to say that you can still drive, but from our point, like, we can't give you a license today. And then so I went to the optometrist, and he just said, look, I'm really sorry, but you can't drive. You are too legally blind, especially in your right eye, but even in your left eye, it's just not enough to be able to drive. And some people throughout my life have been like, oh, like, you should go through it again. And I'm like, that was such a traumatic experience for me, because I am such an independent person. So having that, everybody else around me was getting their driver's licenses, and having that stripped away from me as a teenager was just, it was a huge catastrophic event in my life, and I really fell into a deep depression. So I really don't want to have to relive that when I already know the answer. 2020, yeah, I know, 2020. Basically, I was studying at the time. I was doing my advanced diploma, and obviously everybody was in lockdown, so it was all online. And I think I just woke up one day, and I just had, it was in my right eye, I just had floaters. And it wasn't just a couple of floaters here and there, it was a full swarm of floaters in my eye. I could not see out of my eye, and it was absolutely horrifying to experience that, because I didn't know what was happening. At that point, I had not really seen an eye specialist other than my optometrist, my high risk optometrist, mind you, for my prescription glasses, and that was it. I didn't see any specialist, especially with ROP. I had never really seen a specialist up until that point. So going through that process in 2020 was really tricky. I saw like 2 different proper eye doctors before I saw my now doctor that I see, who is an ROP specialist. He knows my history really well. He was the one that told me what stage I had based on like the scar tissue in my eyes. I'm sure a lot of you will probably think like, oh, why doesn't she try like implantable contact lenses? I've tried that, I've looked into that. I went to an eye surgeon and I had a full day of different tests and things like that, and he basically just said, look, it's like for you and your eye shape, like I said before, my eye shape is quite, my actual eye socket shape, it's very elongated, which is where the near short-sightedness comes in, and also not just that, but my eyelids as well, like the shape of my actual eye. For me, it's not a reversible surgery, and this was back in 2016 by the way. He said, look, to be honest, I can only guarantee that you're gonna have the eyesight that you've got now with your glasses on. I can't guarantee any more than that, and even then it's still probably not going to be enough to get your license. That type of surgery is just not worth the risk to me, because it can go, it can go backwards, even if you have healthy eyes. So from that, thankfully it ended up being just 2 popped blood vessels in my right eye that was causing the floaters. Thankfully nothing happened, there was no detachment of the retina. The only things that I still experience sometimes are just floaters, and they kind of come and go, so it's yeah. I also wanted to just preface that, like, growing up I did have like a teacher's aide, and like the things that I had to do, like I always had to sit at the front of the class. The teachers had to write in a very specific like colour, like they couldn't use green or green or red. I just could not read them very well, and I had to write decently sized even though I was at the front, so that I could read what they were writing and understand it and comprehend it and like write it down if I needed to. Another thing that they did was they, like any sort of printing that they did, they blew it up for me to make it super big, and then on top of that I had like one of those really old big, well I say old, 2000s big like magnifying glasses, and it would like just go across the page and I would use that. The teasing and bullying of my voice, but it was also having glasses, because in the early 2000s, if you're in primary school then, not a lot of kids wore glasses at all. Honestly, I think of my glasses now as an accessory. I mean, they're expensive, very expensive accessories, by the way. Now for my third and hopefully final disability that I experience, and it's been the most recent, although like not really, but it's been the most prominent recently in the last 5 years or 6 years now. I always had fluctuating hearing problems with like grommets and then infections and then grommets and then infections, and they weren't just like, oh, it's a little painful. It was excruciatingly painful infections. My eardrums are in immaculate condition, which is great, aside from the heap of scarring, which I have now seen. It's really, really interesting, the amount of things that, even with going back to my voice, the amount of things that I've been able to see in my own body is super fascinating. Like, I've seen so much scarring on my ears, and I've seen so much scarring on my vocal cords, and obviously I've seen the images of my eyes, and yeah, it's really interesting. I've really learned so much about myself and how my body wants to live in this world as a disabled person. So aside from that, I really didn't have a lot of issues with my ears at all. I had some like noise sensitivity a lot growing up, and I still do. It wasn't until like 2020 when again I was studying and I'd started to hear like ringing in my ear, but when I heard the ringing, my hearing would go at the same time, and I'm like, and it would only be for a few seconds, and then it would come back and be like, okay, that's weird. I'm just gonna ignore that and pretend it didn't happen. And then it just slowly over time continued, and I noticed my hearing starting to go a little bit more, and so I went to get a hearing test. And again, similar with my eyes, at this point I did not have an ear specialist. I didn't have a regular ENT that I went to. Yeah, I'd started to have some symptoms, and it wasn't just the tinnitus. I had fullness in my ear, and then I was experiencing a lot of toothache at the time too, on both sides, and it was my bottom wisdom teeth. May 11th, 2020, I got them removed. And when I tell you it was the most traumatic experience, one of the most medically traumatic experiences, I've not been to the dentist since, literally. 2 weeks after this traumatic event, I got my first attack of vertigo. Now, I'd kind of had some like dizzy lightheadedness here and there, because like I said earlier, with my voice, when I projected too much, I'd get dizzy. But it was only like a split second, and I just, rested and all that. But this was full-blown, spinning everything around me. It wasn't just like everything enhanced, it was the room was spinning, I was spinning, and my first attack was out at Big W, our local, just a clothing store that we have here, and I was on my own, and by the way, I get public transport everywhere, so I was on my own, like I was sitting and I was leaning down, I was putting shoes on, and then it just came on, and I was like, what the hell is this? So I don't know how the hell I got home, but I stumbled home, and it was raining too, so it was pouring down, I could barely see as it is, so I'm trying to wait for this bus, and I'm just spitting and spitting, and I got home and I just laid down and I slept through it. And then from that point on, I was having vertigo attacks like maybe like 5-6 times a month. I was having the hearing loss, increasingly more tinnitus, and I was also starting to experience what's called pulsatile tinnitus. I had seen an audiologist, like I'd just gone to like a hearing thing to get my hearing test, and they're like, yeah, you got pretty significant hearing loss. This is, you know, and we had been like slowly tracking it over like a couple of months. They're like, yeah, we're gonna send you to an ENT specialist. I'm like, cool. And then the ENT specialist that I got sent to was like, it's probably from being really I'm gonna send you to another specialist that might be able to investigate a bit more. So then I went to him, and then he was like, okay, let's do some testing, let's rule a few things out. So I had an MRI, I had a CT, and then I had a balance test. Balance test I couldn't even finish because it was that bad. I had to do, it's usually like a, you know, 3-4 hour like block of time to do testing roughly, but I had to do it in 2 separate days because it got to like a point where I was just like, I can't physically do this anymore. But yeah, I had an MRI CT, they came back fine. Again, I couldn't even finish the balance test. Like I kind of finished it, but the actual part that's supposed to supposedly diagnose the mini ears disease, that's the test that I could not get through. So yeah, aside from the little like possible 2 conditions on my CT and MRI, like everything else looked fine. There was no like tumours there, because sometimes that's a possibility. From that point, my ENT was just like, okay, well, let's put you on some medication, and you just have to have a low salt diet. Now, unfortunately, mini ears is a very blanket diagnosis. It's basically when they don't really know what you've got, so they just say, oh, it's mini ears disease. That's kind of it. Some people do, there are some actual like scans and stuff you can have done. I didn't have it, but there are some scans you can have to actually show mini ears disease, or like show the indications of mini ears disease. The CT and MRI that I had didn't show any of that, but that's also something that you can only see with the contrast dye, which I didn't have. That was a really, really traumatic time in my life. Like 2020 for everybody was super traumatic, not just with the world and what it was like, but for me health wise there was just so much happening. And 2023 was when I got my hearing aids. It's been a couple of years and they've helped me a lot, I will say that. I know some people they help, some people they don't, but for me they worked great. This year alone, I probably had 2 vertigo attacks, which is incredible, because, you know, 2 years ago that was not the case, or even longer, for like 3-4 years ago that was not the case. I know some of my triggers as like sleep and stress. If I don't get enough sleep, I will have an attack. If I'm stressed as well, like so overwhelming stressed, I will start having more symptoms and vertigo attacks. Salt has ended up not being, at least at this point, it's not really a trigger. Like I can have Maccas twice in a day and be fine. So that's been super, super interesting, and everybody with this disease is so different. So I am going to be seeing a new ENT specialist soon, to see if I can get some more investigation done, because I really want to just confirm, even if I have to get the contrast dye, just to confirm that I actually do have mini ears disease and it's not been misdiagnosed just by a 50% test that I didn't even complete fully. Yeah, I just really, really want to be sure. So yeah, those are kind of the disabilities, and living with them has been really, really challenging a lot of the time, and especially now as a mum, it's a real struggle. I might go into a deeper video if you guys are interested on that journey, and I probably will talk about that. But yeah, it's really, really rough, but I'm so thankful that I have my amazing partner and our families that are truly so supportive. Yeah, living with disabilities is rough, and I still get discriminated a lot, especially in the job force, in the job world. My last job that I had that I got through a disability support agency was Subway, and I worked there for 2 years, and then I left to study, and I have not been able to get a job since. Especially with not being able to drive, that's been the most that I've been sort of discreetly like discriminated for, is not being able to drive. because it limits me so heavily. And then again, now on top of my Meniere's disease, because of the vertigo and stuff, I'm just not reliable, and that's also why I'm looking for a work from home position specifically. So that's going to be it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Please feel free to be open and share your experiences down below. This is a very open and safe space, and yeah, I just want you all to know that you're loved and you're appreciated, and thank you for watching. Bye.